What do you think about like childcare?
It depends on the couple, but
No, like a childcare company, and they discriminate.
Like a childcare company.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of an example, like daycare. Would you be okay with them discriminating against like having male daycare employees?
No.
They discriminate based on criminal record and if you're in the adult industry, as in they don't think adult industry people should be babysitting kids at a daycare, or if you have a violent criminal record, you have no place in a daycare. But their sex or gender of daycare people is irrelevant.
Yeah, men should not, I'm not saying men should be discriminated against for different positions. I'm just saying, like, look at everyone. And a lot of companies are, because of the way that the world has been set up, a lot of companies are controlled by men, and so slowly but surely the line goes down and women are more and more discriminated against in the workplace because of the way that those companies have started. I'm not trying to say that, like, in the 1800s when these companies were started, like Wells Fargo or whatever, that it makes sense for, like, I'm like not saying that it's bad that a man runs that company. I'm saying that it's bad if that man has a history of discriminating.
But okay, I'd still like to get an answer on this. The wage gap. Explain precisely what the wage gap is.
That women get paid less than men for the same job in a lot of different companies.
I also think women are afraid to ask for more money, and there's a lot of women are afraid to ask for more money, and they have a lot of like issues with that. And men are not afraid of that. Men will ask, "Hey, I need this, and that." And woman is very much not like that, so the men take advantage of that also.
But so what I'm asking though is, when we're looking at the wage gap, when you hear these numbers, what specifically is it looking at?
What do you mean?
So are you comparing all the money that women make in the country versus all the money that the men make in the country?
No, I'm not looking at that.
So what specifically are you saying it's controlled?
No. I'm saying in a lot of different jobs, might not be this one, it might not be other jobs in LA specifically, but in a lot of jobs, if I applied for a job and a male counterpart of mine applied for a job, a male would be offered more money or given more money for a very similar job because he's a man. And even if you haven't seen that your very self in this industry that you work in, it is still a thing in a lot of industries.
Well, my industry that I work in, I can talk broadly about the entertainment industry. You live in Los Angeles, for example. There's been actually hiring practices where they're actually excluding the hiring of white people and white men specifically, and men specifically. There's massive amounts of affirmative action in the entertainment industry. So this idea that there's like, and it's not just affirmative action in the entertainment industry. We see this in all industries. Women predominate in HR, and women are overwhelmingly the one who are making hiring decisions at these companies. I guess what I'm trying to get to with the wage gap is, so the wage gap doesn't, the one that's often cited, 72 cents, 82 cents, 84 cents, who knows, it's always changing, is it's looking at the full-time earnings of all women and comparing it to the full-time earnings of all men. It doesn't account for hours worked, it doesn't account for overtime, it doesn't account for commute time, it doesn't account for hazard pay, it doesn't account for the type of job, it doesn't account for like a dozen different metrics. It's just simply comparing the money that women make to the money that men make. And so if it was the case that men work more, for example, which they do, men work more hours than women, you start to see it shrink. And then if you start looking at specific industries and you compare like for like, it shrinks more. You'd agree with me that men and women pursue different things when it comes to college education, academia, and career.
But do you know why?
Choice.
No.
Yes, it's absolutely choice. Women have any choice that they can pursue.
Yes.
You have a tax attorney, a corporate attorney on the panel.
Okay.
She's not relegated to being a secretary.
I'm not saying that.
And she's also an immigrant too. She's an immigrant and a woman and would you consider her a person of color?
Yeah, that's why I would agree that it's really your personal pursuit whether you want to stick with your dream. And I don't personally think there's like a significant wage gap. I can only speak to my own industry, that I have compared salaries with my colleagues. Of course, we all, no matter like men or women, we all started pretty much similar salary. I think the only wage gap that could happen later on was because of course, women, they have childbearing responsibility, they have child care responsibilities,
Yep.
because usually I have to say the women have to make more sacrifices in the early stage after the child is born. So they have to take a lot more time off to take care of the child, and maybe have to make difficult career decisions to step back from promotion opportunities. But I think from the starting point, I think we are pretty equal in terms of my industry.
However, would you agree that more women since birth are pushed to being things that make less money than men?
I think that's more a personal choice. Like some women, they may choose to step back and take a more, to have more work-life balance to take care of their family. So that's why they will go into like HR and secretary jobs. And of course, women who choose to be more ambitious and career-oriented, they may take on some more difficult jobs, like becoming a doctor or lawyer or some other
Can I ask,
leadership
have
positions.
you only lived in Los Angeles?
I have actually lived in China, in Canada, and Europe, and US.
Okay, so lots of liberal areas.
I wouldn't say so because
Canada, Europe.
I wouldn't say
LA.
China. I mean, American government
not
has
China,
been
but you
always
moved
saying
here
there's
for a
so much
reason.
propaganda like going on in China. So I wouldn't say China is like liberal. And actually, a
Yes.
lot of Americans think China is very behind on liberal
Yes, of
issues.
course.
So
But I mean, in like the States and like whatever, have you only lived in LA and where'd you say?
LA and DC. But I don't think your political opinions or your personal values are affected by like where you're geographically located.
Well, I know plenty of people who grew up in like more conservative areas, smaller towns, southern towns, who would say that since birth they have been pushed towards more idealistic feminism gender roles, where like they were told to be more girly and to not apply themselves to more male
As
jobs.
in, like the parents who tell their daughters just to go to college so they can find a husband.
Exactly.
As in, so my mother's father, who was a World War II that was in the Navy, he sent all of his daughters to college so they could go find husbands. Now, that is still a thing. There's also generational, like I'm from a town where there's women who are generationally having babies to live off of welfare. And that is something that was like their mother raised them that way, and they think that they just need to get knocked up. They don't need to be with the man, so they get the government benefits. There are problems with the United States. So I think sometimes immigrants have a better attitude coming into the U.S., and they honestly feel like the world is their oyster, whereas when you're born, whether I think your economic or financial situation makes a big difference
Totally.
on the type of opportunities or fair wages that you get. I think a lot of women barely graduate high school, already have kids. There was a daycare in the high school in the city that I went to.
Yeah.
I mean, those women never got to figure out who they were or wanted to be, but they're already mothers of two, and they're dealing with that. Now they're 35 messaging me on Facebook saying, your life looks like so much fun. Because I am single, haven't had kids, no divorces. On paper, I'm like total wifey material.
Something people say to me is like, it's not fair that you're talking about these issues when you don't have these issues. I'm very lucky to be, I grew up in Los Angeles, California, very liberal. I grew up with very liberal parents. I'm not poor. I have a good life. I went to a good liberal high school, and I go to a college. You know, I have so many wonderful rights. But when you look at the entire United States, if you look at the poor little states, poor little cities in Alabama, South Carolina, like all
You're
those
naming
places,
red states.
Red states. If you
blue
look
states
at
there's the same thing
if you
happening.
look at the small cities in little states that have issues,
I grew up very close to the Amish country.
Yeah.
Virginville, Blue Ball, Intercourse, Pennsylvania. Those,
even Pennsylvania, Amish country.
there is all sorts of things happening, and men who are told they have to marry a woman, and there's a lot of arranged marriage, but these guys are actually on Grindr.
Exactly.
You know, I drove through the town with my friend who prefers men, and he got on the app, and he couldn't believe all these hot farmer boys that are popping up.
I'm sorry, what does this have to do with the wage gap? But so back to this.
It
Just
depends
saying
where